God of War Ragnarok concludes the story of Kratos and Atreus, the iconic father and son duo. And historically, this game has never failed to present new and intriguing characters that contribute to the overall plot. Tyr, the Norse god of war, is one of these characters in God of War 2018. There were references to Tyr and his good actions for the Jotuns and Midgardians, but the Aesir gods never made an appearance. For many years, it was thought that Odin killed him as retaliation for his sins against Asgard and the All-Father's plans to exert his dominance over all 9 realms. However, in God of War Ragnarok, Santa Monica Studios shocked everyone when they announced that Tyr was alive and would join Kratos and Atreus on their journey to avert Ragnarok. But was Tyr really that important? And was the game's depiction mythologically correct? Before we go any further, there are major spoilers of the game, so be warned. Tyr's impact was extremely subtle throughout the plot of God of War Ragnarok. However, as the game progressed, it became clear that the Norse God of War was not who he first presented himself as, both figuratively and literally. During the second act of God of War Ragnarok's story, it's revealed that the Tyr that Kratos and Atreus rescued, brought into their safe haven, and shared all their strategies with was an elaborate illusion set by none other than Odin himself. Although Odin's disguise as Tyr gave the impression that the true Norse God of War had been murdered by the All-Father, this is far from the truth. After finishing the main story and remaining side missions, players will finally meet face-to-face with the actual live Tyr if they continue their adventure in Niflheim. Even though it was a great relief to find out that the Norse God of War was alive and well, he contributed very little to the overall story of Ragnarok, and his fate was again wrapped in a shroud of mystery. So let's look into the place where he has been adapted from, the Tyr from the real Norse mythology. But even there is a sort of mystery as there is only myth surrounding him. Like most figures found within the often fragmented and contradictory ancient Norse religion, Tyr's ancestry and path to his many thrones are convoluted and highly disputed. Most myths about the God of War refer to Odin as his father, which is the path that the God of War franchise has taken so far through dialogue and character development. Other accounts, however, argue that the giant Ymir is Tyr's biological father. It was difficult to overlook the fact that Santa Monica Studios' representation of the figure is on the taller side in Ragnarok, which might indicate that some type of merging of the roots has occurred inside the game's universe. In general, God of War has constructed an incarnation of Tyr that, apart from similar traits, differs substantially from the one found in Norse mythology. The character in God of War has been described as diplomatic to the point of pacifism, rebelling against Odin and Thor following the murder of Jotunheim's giants. This deed drove the father to jail his son while publicly stating he had executed him. In Norse mythology, there is no literary evidence of Tyr ever turning against his Aesir kin, despite the various transgressions, with the god instead ultimately giving his life in a futile attempt to preserve the pantheon. The central myth surrounding Tyr was the binding of Fenrir. Loki's pet wolf from God of War was actually his son in Norse mythology. The gods had a terrible foreboding about him and kept Fenrir in Asgard as they could keep a close and watchful eye on him. Tyr was the only one who dared to feed Fenrir when he was a pup. The beast grew and grew, and the gods realized they couldn't keep him in their home any longer. Knowing the havoc Fenrir would do if he was allowed to wander the earth, they decided to tie him up using different chains and ropes. The gods would tell Fenrir that these bonds were just competitions of strength, and they would clap and cheer when the wolf broke through each attempted constraint. Desperate for a solution, the gods sent word to the dwarves, the best artisans in the cosmos, to make something that even Fenrir could not wrestle free from. They constructed 𝐦𝐤𝐿, a rope made from the sound of a cat's footsteps, a woman's beard, a stone's roots, a fish's breath, and a bird's spittle. Since these things don't exist, it's futile to struggle against them. When the gods presented 𝐦𝐤𝐿 to Fenrir as yet another strength challenge, he became skeptical. How could the rope possibly hold him? It was too light and silky. Something strange was going on. As a result, he insisted on not being tied until one of the gods placed a hand in his jaws as a symbol of good faith. Tyr was the sole god to step forward, although being well aware of the consequences of his action. Fenrir was finally chained, and as punishment took Tyr's hand. Tyr was left with a lifelong deformity and scar as a result of his bravery for the benefit of the entire world. According to Mimir, these events have seemingly happened within Santa Monica Studios' universe already, although despite the fact that the Norse God of War is shown to have both of his hands. The second myth was the search for a kettle. The story begins with the gods wanting to hold a huge feast, but they didn't have a large enough kettle to make beer for all the gods. Tyr, the one-handed deity, said that his father, 𝐜𝐴𝐬, possessed a kettle large enough for the task. To get the cauldron, Tyr enlisted his friend, Thor, to go together with him to the realm of the anti-gods, to Jotunheim. They ride on Thor's chariot drawn by his two goats. They encounter Tyr's grandma once they enter 𝐜𝐴𝐬's residence. She's a hideous anti-goddess with 9 times 12 heads. Thor and Tyr also encounter Tyr's gorgeous mother, who is never named and is just known as a 𝐜𝐴𝐬 concubine. Now, 𝐜𝐴𝐬 is not at home when the two gods arrive, and Tyr's mother thinks he will be enraged when he learns he has had guests to feed, especially when one of them is Thor, a well-known enemy of their people. Tyr's mother conceals them beneath 𝐜𝐴𝐬's massive kettle. Indeed, 𝐜𝐴𝐬 returns home in a sour temper, his beard frozen from a long day of winter fishing. His concubine meets him at the door, informing him that his son has returned home for a visit. Then Tyr's mother presents their second visitor without revealing his name, then alluding to our famous enemy, the friend of humanity, and ultimately identifying him as Thor, son of Odin. As predicted, 𝐜𝐴𝐬 is enraged to be entertaining the two gods, particularly Thor, who has slaughtered so many of 𝐜𝐴𝐬's relatives. 𝐜𝐴𝐬 strikes out at the two gods, breaking 8 of his cauldrons, but leaving the one they've taken refuge behind untouched. After expressing his fury, he acknowledges the traditional necessity to provide hospitality and orders 3 bulls slain and cooked to feed his own household as well as his great visitors. One of Thor's most consistent characteristics is his enormous appetite, and on this occasion, Thor eats 2 of the 3 bulls that were slaughtered on his own. His host is disappointed and says he'll have to go fishing if everyone wants to eat tomorrow. Thor expresses his willingness to assist with the fishing. Strangely, Thor's host indicates that he might easily obtain bait for fishing, not from worms in the soil, but from among his oxen. So Thor walks out to the herd and cuts off the entire head of one of the oxen to use as his massive bait. Then Thor and his host 𝐜𝐴𝐬 row out into the deep ocean, where the great 𝐜𝐴𝐬 captures 2 whales. Meanwhile, Thor baits his hook with the ox skull and casts it into the sea, where he is attacked by the monstrous Jormungand. The snake fights Thor so fiercely that one of Thor's feet smashes through the bottom of the boat as he tries to reel in the monster. But finally, Thor makes the serpent's head surface. And as these 2 destined enemies stare at one another, and Thor heaves back with his hammer to strike the monster its death blow, the cowardly anti-god 𝐜𝐴𝐬 cuts Thor's fishing line. The monster sinks back into the sea. After Thor fails to pull the massive snake up on deck, they paddle back to shore. Back at home, 𝐜𝐴𝐬 tells Thor that he must put his might to the test by breaking his drinking cup. Although the cup appears to be made of glass, Thor breaks stones and a wall trying to shatter it until Tyr's mother tells Thor that there is nothing harder than 𝐜𝐴𝐬's head, so Thor can break the cup on that. Thor then breaks the cup on 𝐜𝐴𝐬's head, and a disappointed 𝐜𝐴𝐬 declares that if they're strong enough to lift it, they can take his kettle out and deliver it home to the gods. Tyr tries to lift it and fails, but manages to lift it over his head and carry it out. Thus, the 2 gods brought back a cauldron large enough to make beer for all the gods. Tyr's next appearance within the Norse mythological timeline relates to the end of the pantheon. During the twilight of the Norse gods, Tyr brutally battles the giant wolf Garmr in defense of Asgard in a fight that sees both characters meet their mutual ultimate demise. In God of War, Garmr dies at the hands of Loki to become Fenrir. And that sums it up. What we learned is that the lack of information on the Norse god is what allowed Santa Monica to create a unique character history out of him as a rebellion. Isn't it? Think about it and comment your thoughts below. See you next time.